What's up, champs, and welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm Jeremy Versillo, and joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Derrick. Derrick, how are you doing today in semifinal week, and more importantly, how are your teams doing?
I'm doing okay. My Cacupful team is not having the best time at this moment. My opponent had a really great off night last night. So there's a chance I might be out in the semifinals here. In my other leagues, thankfully, things are going pretty well. And still not over in Cacupful either, so we're going to keep working right till the end.
That's good to hear. I've got 4 teams in semifinals this week, and I would categorize all 4 as too close to call. Hoping I can pull out 3 wins out of the 4, but who knows, maybe even all 4. Well, let's get right into it. First up, we have a handful of injuries, including a couple of last-minute ones that happen to affect a few of my teams. First of all, the big one, Valeri Nichushkin is out with a lower body injury. He did seem a step slow last game when I watched them. I'm a big fan of the Avs lineup, so I like watching them whenever I can. The big thing from this is Casey Mittelstadt stepped into Power Play 1. Would you be looking to add him, or is it kind of not relevant with a busy Thursday and a busy Saturday this week?
Yeah, well, I mean, as of recording, you're not going to get him for Thursday. You're probably not going to get him for Saturday, and that's going to be a common theme tonight because 30 out of 32 teams play on Saturday. Your lineup's probably already full. So at that point, you know, maybe if one of your players is slumping, and we'll talk about some slumping players later, you might pick him up to get in on the Saturday, but really you're thinking about the next game after that. And Colorado does play on the Monday of Yahoo Week 25, I think it is. It's Cacupful Finals week. It might be for you as well. But Monday, April 1st, Colorado plays. So if you're in a position where that game is of importance to you, you can consider picking him up. And then potentially after that, you know, if things aren't going well, you can drop him.
On the downside, though, it sounds like the injury is short-term, so if you do pick up Mittelstadt trying to project ahead for that Monday game, he may not even be up on that power play by that time. Still the second-line center, so not a terrible streamer either way. Some other injuries. Thomas Chabot is out. It sounds like something he's been dealing with for a bit now. He's day-to-day, according to the coach. Tyler Kleven got recalled, just kind of a filler young defenseman getting a chance in the NHL. On Toronto, Liljegren did not take warm-ups, and this was kind of a surprise. They activated Mark Giordano from LTIR, which may have some cap implications. That was kind of an unexpected move. I had honestly forgotten about Giordano. It sounds like McCabe is on Power Play 1 with both Liljegren and Riley out. Again, I'm not sure if I'm really picking up Jake McCabe because of his power play time, even though he does play with good players there. And Patrick Kane is out today with illness for Detroit, which probably means he's back Saturday. Any big things from those 3?
Yeah, I'd say with the Leafs, so I've been watching the game tonight, and McCabe did get up on, I believe it's only been 1 power play Toronto's had. McCabe's been pretty valuable for, you know, banger leagues recently, so Power Play 1 exposure is a nice bonus there. The other interesting thing is it was Giordano's first game back, and he got his first goal in quite a long time, so congrats, Mark Giordano.
Yeah, he did put that first one in against Washington as the Leafs are kind of blowing them out right now.
Yeah, a couple goals for Tyler Bertuzzi as well tonight.
Yeah, it looks like he just put in his second. That's a nice hold if you happen to have him. I know a lot of people in my leagues were streaming him last week. He had some good deployment and did some things with it. Looking like he's building a strong streak going into the end of the season and playoffs. On the outjury side of things, we have Dakota Joshua back for Vancouver. He was playing third line earlier this year, but was scoring a lot. He was actually fantasy relevant somehow, being on the third line with minimal power play time. One of those kind of Cy Young Award winners. A lot of goals, not a lot of assists. He's on the first line, which kind of makes me interested. Like, you could do worse, especially since Vancouver plays Sunday this week. They're only one of 2 teams playing Sunday. Could be a nice option to add for the last-minute hero stream. Additionally, Aaron Ekblad is back for Florida, and Joel Eriksson and Jonas Brodin are back for Minnesota. I believe Eriksson has a goal tonight. Anything to add on those guys?
Yeah, definitely good to see Joel Eriksson back. I don't think Brodin is likely to be fantasy relevant, depending on your format. Ekblad has been, really not having a great year, and the value of Florida defensemen has shifted around a lot, and Forsling has kind of been on the verge of being the most relevant recently. So it's going to be tough when, again, especially a busy Saturday night coming up. You could potentially be activating an Ekblad, but not getting in any extra games. So consider that. But Florida does have a really good schedule at the beginning of next week as well. So not much more beyond that, I think.
I'm kind of with you there. There's not really much to talk about with those guys. Ekblad's playing power play 2 because Montour's there. Eriksson obviously you're putting him in the lineup as fast as you can. Brodin's kind of good for hits and blocks, but even then, he's kind of one of those fringe streamers for peripherals. And I guess the one last injury news is Gabe Vilardi is skating. His spleen has returned to normal size, which is a sentence I never thought I would be saying. And he's not playing tonight, but sounds like he may kind of be on track for Saturday. They wanted to get him up to full speed before forcing him back into the lineup, and they have the luxury to be able to do that. Finally, really only one deployment headline I could find other than the injury-related ones. The Panthers shuffled up their lines, and that includes Vladimir Tarasenko and Evan Rodrigues, both on the first line with Barkov. That line has a goal tonight. It was Tarasenko from Barkov, and I forget who the secondary was. Tarasenko's been a tough player these past couple weeks to decide whether or not to keep or hold, because you see so much potential and the talent's there, but then he's on the third line in power play 2, and you're like, are we holding him? I ended up holding him this week. I think Shams dropped him. I've fortunately got the goals from that, but I could totally see why you would have dropped him a while ago, and if he's available, consider adding him for next week.
Yeah, and in fact, Barkov also has a goal as well tonight, so I'm not sure who the other point getters are on that, but it does seem like good deployment for him for sure.
Yeah, if they keep scoring like that, they're more likely to stick together, especially if the team does well. So, yeah, keep an eye on that deployment.
Also, one note, I just saw a tweet that Florida's actually shuffled the lines in the third here. So Rodrigues was on the top line, but he's been replaced by Verhaeghe as of the third period. And instead, Rodrigues actually bumped down to the fourth. So I'm not sure the story behind that, but interesting that Tarasenko is holding the deployment with Barkov, but otherwise things have changed up a bit. We've got Nick Cousins taking Verhaeghe's spot on the second line with Bennett and Tkachuk.
Which is interesting because that still leaves Reinhart on the third line, although at this point I kind of think Reinhart can drive a lot of his own offense, and that may be what Florida's going for. Definitely think Tarasenko is a safer add than Rodrigues if you're trying for a long shot streamer. With that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. For this next section, we've got a bit of something different for you. Instead of doing a hot-cold, we are just doing rapid-fire cold streaks of kind of big-name players who've been pretty cold lately, and we're going to talk about whether or not you could consider cutting them for next week. The first guy I've got is Rasmus Dahlin, who's got 2 points in his last 5 games, 0 in his last 3. He's still shooting, he's still hitting, he's still blocking. I'm keeping him. I don't think that's a difficult question. What about you?
It's probably the easiest one on the list. Absolutely keep. He plays an off-night game tomorrow. He's one of the best defensemen of the year. I have no idea how you'd possibly try to find a defenseman roster slot streamer that's going to, or combination of streamers that's going to get you more points than Rasmus Dahlin, over the foreseeable future. If anything, like it's the schedule next week isn't great to start the week, but still, I would never be, he's not someone I would be dropping even at this point. I'm sure there's someone on your roster who's more droppable than him.
Totally. And you mentioned schedule. I think that's a great point. Since this is semifinal week for most people, we'll be taking schedule into account looking forward. If there's a questionable schedule next week, it's a bit easier to drop a guy who's on the fringes. On to another defenseman, Noah Dobson, who started the year on fire, has only 2 points in his last 10 games, and that includes an assist tonight. The shots are trending down. The hits and blocks and the deployment are kind of still there. I'm a bit more worried about Dobson, but the schedule next week is good with Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday games against Philly, Chicago, Columbus, and Nashville. I would kind of bet on him breaking the slump next week, so I'm definitely not dropping him.
Yeah, you're going to hear me also reference the schedule a lot. Next week is a very interesting week in that, there's so many days are even. Saturday is the only day that really stands out above the rest, but even still, you might be able to fit a streamer in. So it's really about quantity of games, and ideally quantity of games in the early part of the week. So then you can stream a few and then potentially stream in a few other games as well. You can pretty easily get 5 games out of a roster slot next week. You may even be able to get 6. So I would definitely be keeping Dobson again for that Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday game next week and his production throughout the season.
Especially for a defenseman where most people are only rostering 3 or 4 to begin with. Some forwards, you may get tricky on some of those busier nights, although next week isn't terrible for busy nights. I think Saturday and Sunday are on the busy side, but that's about all. Next up, another defenseman. Charlie McAvoy only has 2 points in his last 12 games, and only 8 points in his last 20. The 2 points in the last 12 were actually in the same game. He's gone through stretches with 0 or 1 hits in a game. I'm kind of ready to drop Charlie McAvoy if that doesn't sound too crazy. Boston's only got 3 games next week. They're against some pretty good teams, and they're on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I think Charlie McAvoy is someone it's okay to let go of, especially if you're in one of those shallower or streaming heavy leagues.
I think that we're still too high on the quality of player at this point. I would still be hanging on to a McAvoy. There's no way you drafted 3 defensemen better than Charlie McAvoy that you're going to hang on to, and McAvoy is the one you're going to drop to stream in an extra game or 2.
That's fair. I do have McAvoy on my bench in a couple leagues this week on Tuesday and Thursday next week, I think, just because I have 6 defensemen in those leagues because people don't value them somehow. But I guess dropping may be a bit extreme. It's one of those things where I'm not looking to drop him, but I wouldn't blame you, and I bet there are some people out there who could afford to do it. Our next guy is, I guess we just started with a ton of defensemen. It's Erik Karlsson, who's only got 0 points in his last 5 games, including tonight. He doesn't have any points. He has been shooting, though. His last 5 games, he's got 3, 1, 5, 3, and 5 shots. Not really a big peripherals guy. He's kind of lost some of that power play 1 deployment, though. It looks like they've gone back to Letang. I know Pittsburgh's been desperate to get any sort of power play action, and they've got 2 goals tonight from Malkin on that top unit. I'm not looking to drop Erik Karlsson. I believe they've got a pretty good schedule next week. I closed that tab while we were talking, so I'm going to have to reopen it. I would be okay dropping Karlsson if he doesn't fit your lineup. But like you said with McAvoy, there's a good chance you don't have many better defensemen than that.
Yeah, we're finally getting the point where someone who's, over the course of the season been underperforming enough that I'd consider it, but the schedule weighs out in Karlsson's favor this time. Again, playing Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, so you could get 4 games and still be able to drop him, at that point if you needed a Sunday stream after that.
Totally, especially with that Sunday being open. I do like the guys early in the week for a championship week, especially if you're in a league that lets you make a ton of moves. I don't think many leagues exist that let you make infinite moves anymore. That used to be a thing. If you can make infinite weekly moves, you have no excuse to not have a full lineup on Sunday of championship week, and arguably on Saturday of championship week also. Next up, we've got Chris Kreider, who has 1 point in his last 5 games. He has 1 shot in his last 2 games. Still hitting, still getting that power play deployment. I'm probably not dropping Kreider. Like, what he does for that New York Rangers power play is just too good and too consistent to stay cold for long. The Rangers also have a great schedule next week with Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, so you should be able to get him in a forward slot every day of the week. Are you dropping Kreider?
No, I'm not. I have him in Cupful, and I'm sad about the cold streak, but in addition to that great schedule coming up, it's all against teams with questionable goaltending. We've got Arizona, Pittsburgh, New Jersey, Detroit, and Montreal. So I would love to make it into the finals, and I'd love for Kreider to put in a few goals on those teams.
Yeah, that's a good point. Those are teams that, some of them are teams that like I think of as pretty good, but the goalie's been bad. Good catch there. Next up, Andrei Svechnikov has 0 points in his last 3 games and only 3 in his last 10. I think he's kind of fallen victim to Jake Gensel. He's now on the 3rd line currently. His time on ice has been going down. He played 15 minutes, 14 and a half minutes. He's under 13 today, although I think there's still part of a period left to play. I'm definitely fine dropping Svechnikov. I'm kind of a bit worried about him. Additionally, Carolina doesn't play until Thursday next week. They play Thursday, Friday, Sunday. Although the Friday-Sunday games are against Washington and Columbus, which is nice. I just think you probably can get more games played out of that slot if you pick up someone who plays Monday, Wednesday or something.
Yeah, this is a sad one for me, but it is my first one. I am going to say drop, big name player, high draft capital, but only plays Saturday, and then, like you said, not again until Thursday. Down on the 3rd line, not a lot of ice time. It's just, he's been hot and cold throughout the season, and his entire situation is cold right now. So that's a very hard drop, but that's the kind of thing you got to do in playoffs, I think, is drop a Svechnikov and get a lot more value out of that roster slot over the course of the next 5 or 6 days.
Another guy who is pretty cold, Tyler Toffoli, 0 points in his last 5 games. This is after a great start after being traded to Winnipeg. In addition to the lack of goals, he's only taken, looks like 6 shots over his last 5 games. His time on ice has been closer to 15 minutes than to the 18 to 20. I think Toffoli was kind of a fringe guy after the trade anyway. I know there's been a lot of do I keep or do I cut suggestions. He only plays Monday, Thursday, Saturday next week. That's a pretty easy cut for me.
Yeah, same here. Again, not a great schedule and definitely hasn't been performing.
Brandon Hagel has 1 point in his last 4 games and 5 points in his last 10. The shots on goal are down. The power play time is kind of fluctuating, but I'd say it's down overall. He's still getting a lot of ice time, but Anthony Duclair has popped into the top 6 there. Just a little bit more muddiness in the water in Tampa Bay. I'm totally fine dropping Hagel. I think he's one of those guys that you probably picked up early or late in your draft, and he stayed on your roster all year because he's been good. But I think he's okay to cut. On the other hand, his schedule is pretty good with a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. So maybe you hold him for that.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with this one if you're cutting with purpose. You're cutting to do something specific with the slot. But at the same time, like you said, he's still getting ice time. He's got a good schedule. He's probably not the worst player on your roster to cut if you do really want to add someone.
Frank Vetrano has finally come down to earth after his start. He's still on a career year pace. He's got 30 goals. He's looking like a very nice piece in Anaheim. But he's also only got 2 points in his last 10 games played. Anaheim as a whole has been kind of terrible. They managed only 12 shots against Seattle, of all teams, on Tuesday. We'll see how they do against Seattle on Thursday night. The one saving grace with Vetrano is he's been shooting a ton. His last 10 games shots are 2, 6, 6, 0, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 3. And that is 3 of his team's 12 shots against Seattle. So it does seem like he could break through at any moment, but also doesn't have a great schedule upcoming. I'm torn on this one, actually. Now that I look a bit closer, I thought it was going to be an easy cut, and then I'm seeing those shot numbers and like, maybe I should hold him.
Yeah, the shots for me say keep, and in particular keep if you're in a contested matchup this week for that Sunday game, one of the very few off-night games left this week. So Anaheim plays Vancouver on Sunday, March 31st, and then also has a game pretty early in the following week on the Tuesday. Now, after that Tuesday, there's a couple game gap for Anaheim, so that's probably the point at which I would consider dropping Vatrano, but I would hang on to him until, after that April 2nd game against Calgary, probably.
You're right. You definitely got to keep him for the Sunday game this week. I had next week's schedule up and completely forgot about that. Next up, Mike Matheson only has 2 points in his last 7 games, including one tonight. He's still playing the power play. The big thing with Matheson for me is that the hits and blocks have kind of dried up. Like, he doesn't have a hit in his last 3 games. He has 1 block tonight, 3 blocks the game before, 0 the game before that. I kind of was counting on him for a safe peripheral floor and maybe adding some power play points in there. On the other hand, he's a defenseman who plays 4 games next week. I'd be fine if you wanted to cut him, but you're not going to get much better than 4 games from a single defenseman. I guess I could go either way on this one also. How about you?
The thing is, it's 4 games, but it's backloaded 4 games. He plays the very last Saturday, Sunday of that week, and then prior to that, it's the Tuesday, Thursday. So, if you have a full slate right now for this current Saturday, March 30th, that means you might not get any game from him until April 2nd. So I probably, would consider cutting right now, and then, you can always maybe pick him back up in, midway through next week, if your defenseman roster slots allow.
That's a good point. And the other thing, I was just looking at the schedule, his matchups are really tough next week. Like, Montreal may not be scoring a lot. They play Florida, Tampa, Toronto, and New York, who are, I believe, 4 of the top 5 teams in the East. And those teams prepping for playoffs are probably working on locking down their defense. May not be many points to go around, at least. And like I said, you can't trust his peripherals anymore, apparently. So I'm more okay cutting him now that I think about it. Another fringy defender, Filip Hronek, has 0 points in his last 9 games. That's not very good. He is still playing 20-ish minutes a night. He's shooting some, but not a ton. Periffs are hit or miss. But Vancouver does play that Sunday game you were mentioning, and they also play Tuesday and Wednesday next week. So my strategy with Hronek would be to cut Thursday morning and get, a Thursday, Friday, Sunday guy or a Thursday, Saturday, Sunday guy. Replace that 1 remaining game on Saturday with 3 games, which is always a win when you're streaming.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'd try to do as well. And for example, you could do that and then go turn around and maybe pick, Matheson back up or someone else who has a similar schedule. But yeah, I would hang on to Hronek, especially if you're in a contested matchup right now, through the Sunday game and probably those 2 early week games against Vegas and in Arizona, and cut Thursday morning, like you said, or, on a Wednesday night waiver claim, if that's how your league works.
Jumping back to the forward side of things, Robert Thomas doesn't have a point in his last 5 games. I thought I saw a point earlier today on one of St. Louis's goals, but I think that got changed, so he still doesn't have a point. He's shooting a bit less. Ice time is still good, but he's also never really hit or blocked much. That's a tough one for me. They do play Monday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday next week, and the Saturday, Sunday is San Jose and Anaheim, which are juicy matchups. I'm probably trying to hold on to Thomas, but I could understand cutting him today if he's on your bench Saturday, or cutting him after Monday's game and hoping he's still there Thursday.
Yeah, I think either of those options is fine by me, kind of depending on, how dire your need is and what the, how juicy the alternative is that you could be picking up.
Another forward of similar value, Matt Zuccarello only has 3 assists in his last 9 games. His shots on goal are kind of down too. He hits and blocks, once every other game type of thing. But I'm really just worried that his deployment is no longer with top-end players. He's not playing with Kaprizov or Boldy or Eriksson currently. That makes it really hard unless he's getting points on the power play, which he hasn't been. His last power play point was 10 games ago. I'm okay cutting Zuccarello. Wild play that backloaded Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday game. Honestly, though, if you were going to cut Zuccarello, you probably already should have done it because they only played Thursday, Saturday this week. So maybe I'm a week late with this piece of advice.
Yeah, it's probably a cut for me, just again, because you're probably struggling to fit him in on Saturday, or you could drop him but still have a full roster and again, use that roster slot for some other player who's going to get you more value in the next 6 days.
Another guy, Jeff Skinner, doesn't have a point since his hat trick against Seattle last Monday. Since then, he's managed a total of 6 shots and no points, obviously. He's no longer playing on the first power play, and he's been down on the third line. A couple of those games, he played like 12 or 11 and a half minutes. I'm completely out on Skinner other than the obvious Friday game tomorrow. But there's honestly players on Buffalo I would rather over Skinner, such as Greenway if he's not hurt. I saw he picked up a day-to-day today, or Peterka. And yeah, just don't need Skinner for next week, in my opinion.
Definitely agreed. After the Friday night game, he should probably, unless he's putting up a hat trick, he should be gone, I think.
Yeah, or if somehow he's like your best player to put in on Saturday, but that's probably unlikely unless you got hit with some of these day-to-day type injuries like a couple of us did today. Next up, we have Rasmus Andersson, who has 2 points in his last 10 games, although one of them was tonight. He's not really shooting much anymore. He has a total of 2 hits in his last 10 games, although he's been blocking a lot. Looks like he's on power play 2 with Miramanov taking a lot of power play 1, but Mackenzie Weegar drives the offense at even strength. At this point, honestly, I wouldn't have been holding Rasmus Andersson for a while now. I've generally not been a fan of his, but if you're still holding on to him, he's only got Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday next week. Tuesday is against the Ducks, but I think you're pretty fine to cut him.
Yeah, I don't see any particular need to hang on. Probably something you could do better.
And last but not least, one more flame. Podcast favorite, Blake Coleman. Only 3 points in his last 10 games. The shots on goals have kind of to dry up too. He's hitting still. He's blocking more than most forwards do. He's on power play too. But I've always felt that Coleman was a streamer and nothing more. So again, with that bad Calgary schedule coming up, cut him loose for a Friday or Sunday streamer to help you this week, or someone who's more front-loaded next week.
Same here.
Well, that's all we've got time for. Hopefully this gave you some creative ideas around roster management coming into this final week where you don't have to think about long-term value. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to give us a follow at ShortShiftsKK, as well as Brian and Elon at Keeping Karlsson. Please use www.gamedaytweets.com to get all of the best info from Twitter without having to slog through the rest of that place. It includes team by team and searchable tweets by player name. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, ShiftChart.com, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and John Reed is our digital media producer. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.